Let's add a proof of work requirement to mining a new block for the blockchain. To do this, we'll demand that the block's hash start with a certain number of leading zeros. This is going to require the miner to spend CPU power to generate a bunch of hashes until it finds a valid one. To accomplish this system, we'll add two new properties to the block class, the nonce, or rather the nonce, and the difficulty. The difficulty number defines how many leading zeros the block's generated hash should have. The nonce is an adjusted value which allows the miner to create new hashes based on the block data until the difficulty requirement is satisfied. So these concepts are best understood in code. So we're going to start with the block.test.js file. Let's declare a nonce and a difficulty right before the block. The nonce will start out as 1 and the difficulty will start out as 1 as well. And then we'll add both of these as inputs to the original block instance's object. So we're going to have nonce and difficulty within that incoming object. This allows us to add some expect statements for the nonce and the difficulty. So go ahead and copy one of the expect statements. Expect block.nonce to equal nonce, and expect block.difficulty to equal the actual, or rather the expected difficulty value. All right, nice. Now this also affects our SHA-256 hash generation because now those fields are part of the block. So we're going to take this into account when we generate the crypto hash. So not only do we need the mineblock.timestamp, we need the mineblock.nonce. Likewise, we need the mineblock.difficulty. And this line is rather long, so let's actually place the crypto hash on its own line as well as each one of its parameters. So I'm going to use Command D to highlight all of these spaces, which allows me to make a bunch of new lines as once. It's a neat little trick. Make sure these parameter closing params are on the same matching line as your opening ones as well. Cool. Finally, for the last bit of test, we're going to have the most crucial check for the proof of work system, which is going to check that the hash meets the difficulty criteria. In other words, the generated hash for this new block must have a leading number of zeros that matches the mined block's difficulty. So we're in this mined block function, and we need to add one more test which check whether it sets a hash that matches the difficulty criteria. So let's add that test with a new it block that says it sets a hash. Notice the use of backticks for the keyword. And the requirement is that this meets the difficulty criteria. Cool, here's the callback function. And then what we can expect is that a substring from 0 up to the mineblock.difficulty matches a string of zeros of length equal to that difficulty itself. So that is the actual value. It's that substring on the existing mineblock hash. So we're going to look at the mineblock.hash. We're going to get a substring from 0, so the first character, up to the stored mineblock.difficulty. So we're going to expect that this substring is equal to a bunch of zeros up to that difficulty. We can generate this zero string using the repeat function. So this is a neat JavaScript function which generates a string based off of repeating a string n times. And n in this case, so the number of times to repeat that string in order to generate, is the mineblock.difficulty number. All right, cool. So go ahead and execute these tests in the command line if you don't have it already running in the background. But what you should get is a few tests not passing. So right now, the block.nonce doesn't exist, therefore block.difficulty isn't going to exist either. The SHA-256 is off now that it's also accounting for mineblock.difficulty and mineblock.timestamp. And finally, the generated hash doesn't even try to meet the difficulty requirement just yet. So next up, we're going to implement the code to get these tests to pass. As always, feel free to implement the actual coding part yourself as a bit of a challenge and learning opportunity. All right, with that said, see you in the next one where we try and get these tests back to green through code.